I just fell in love, and then I fell in love again, and then I fell in love again.
I'm like, oh yeah, I can't tell everybody about my normal family.
Good with one marriage, they figure you'll be good with two. I hope they think I'll be good with four.
The wives, they work together as a team, and I want to be a part of that team.
Hey guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are having a good Monday. It's February 8th. We are less than a week away from the next season of Sister Wives, and we are going to have a bit of a different feel this season, and I think fans might be actually more interested and engaged in the content because if you remember last year, literally the entire season revolved around their property on Coyote Pass. Whether or not Robyn and Kody were going to buy a home or rent, they ended up having to buy because there was no rentals that Robyn could find according to them both, which caused a massive issue in their marriage. And they ended up buying an almost $900,000 home. Not smart when you're constantly complaining about money. Then there was that was pretty much the entire season. And then one episode about how Mary and Kody are having a rough patch, which they've been in a rough patch for like 6 years. This season is a little bit different because we are going to see a disengaged Kody Brown. The pandemic has made it so that the Browns are living 4 separate lives. Because of restrictions and wanting to keep family members safe, Kody opted to spend the bulk of his time with Robyn. And during that time, the family division became more and more increased. I think we saw this pretty well on social media. We saw Christine spending a lot of her time by herself, peddling constantly for new scams, whether it was whether it was Unique, LuLaRoe, or any of her multi-level marketing companies that she was involved in, having to raise a ton of cash because Kody is an absent dad for Isabel's surgery. We saw him skip Isabel's surgery. We saw him skip prom photos for the girls. We saw him basically skip anything that didn't involve Robyn. This season, the very first episode is called Being Strong or Being a Bee. And I'm not saying, and it's B as in B-I-T-C-H, which, can I just say, TLC, why is that title even a thing? That's so offensive. Like, why is it that you can't be a strong bee? Why can't you be a strong woman? Why do you have to be strong or a woman? It's just a nasty title. I don't understand why they would even have that as a title. And is it just Kody that thinks that's cute? To me, it's not cute. You can be strong and be a bee, or you could just maybe not refer to women as bees. I don't know, but I don't like it. That was my first takeaway. Second takeaway is that the description of the first week's episode says this: Janelle gathers Kody and the wives to talk about their increasingly tense family dynamic. Kody gets honest and says that he no longer wants to advocate for polygamy. Robyn and Christine open up about their own insecurities as they question everything. So we know that anytime the Browns get together for any one of these family talks, it never ends well. Generally, in the last few years, Mary ends up being incredibly quiet because she's already on the outskirts. Like, she is so far removed from these people, it doesn't even matter. Janelle seems to be one of the only ones engaged at this point in actually making this family unit of the 4 of them work, because to be honest, it seems like Janelle is the only one of the wives that's content in a role of plural marriage. Christine's had tense relationships with the wives and a lot of jealousy, which she has been very honest about. She's also had this season, you're going to see her say that she doesn't want to even do marriage with Kody anymore.
Mary, I can't do marriage with Kody anymore. I don't want to. You don't get to give up like that. I don't want to do it anymore.
But I think Kody saying that he no longer wants to advocate for polygamy anymore is a huge step away from what this show was all about. This show started as a way for the Browns to see how love could multiply and not divide. They wanted to shine the light on polygamy. They wanted to make sure that the world saw what polygamy was, that it was normal, that it wasn't weird, that it wasn't dysfunctional, that, you know, our family was just like you with just multiple wives. So if you want to stop advocating for polygamy, you're kind of removing the entire premise of the show of basically being the spokesperson for polygamous families across the country. They are the most visible polygamous family in the United States. They are largely participatory in rallies for various laws. When Utah recently pushed for new legislation which would decriminalize polygamy, the Browns were humongous parts of those protests. They also advocated strongly for it. Kody has used his Twitter a lot to advocate for plural marriage. So this abrupt about face seems very odd to me. The last few years, he has seemed to be very disengaged with his family. You know, there's times when he will say, I want, you know, as many wives as possible. And then there's other times where it seems like he can barely handle what he has and he's over it. Kody's in his 50s now. Mary just turned 50, and I believe Janelle and Christine are in their late 40s. So you have these wives that have all past middle age. They are no longer producing for him in terms of having children. Robyn is 42, but she hasn't had a baby in a while, and I really don't think that she's going to. I mean, she's admitted that the last two pregnancies that she had were pretty hard on her, and she's at an age where if she has another baby, she would be high risk. She hasn't ruled it out, but I think the 18 kids that he already has are a lot for Kody to handle, being that half of them seem to be neglected by him. Christine, we know, is going to basically say at some point in the season that she doesn't want to do marriage with him, and she also wants to move back to Utah. Well, in the second episode, we're going to see why she wants to move back to Utah, because it all comes down to that legislation I was just talking about, the decriminalization of polygamy. So they moved from Utah in the very beginning of this series because the Utah authorities opened up an investigation into them after they went public about their family. Once they went public, the authorities start investigating them for polygamy crimes, and they ran from Utah to Nevada. They stayed in Utah for they stayed in Nevada for several years, and they recently moved to Flagstaff, Arizona. Well, now that it's decriminalized, they have said that after they moved, they said they would never move back because of the case against them in Utah, which, by the way, there was never criminal charges brought against them. So in the next episode, the second, they're going to visit Utah to actually see friends and family about the decriminalization of polygamy. And they are excited about this option, which could be why Christine wants to move back there, because now she feels maybe that she can live there without being afraid of being who she is. So with the decriminalization of polygamy in the state of Utah, they could effectively live there and basically get nothing more than a slap on the wrist. It's basically equivalent to getting a parking ticket. The Utah legislature argued that this would help families live more out in the open because the bulk of the things that they charge related to polygamy are not the actual multiple marriages, but the other crimes that are associated with it. And so therefore, they don't necessarily look at polygamy as the issue, but the crimes associated with it, which really doesn't make sense because it encourages, some of these groups encourage underage marriages, and it puts women in a really submissive, controlled position, brainwashed. Men have way too much power. There's just a lot of systemic issues, and only in Utah would they make this legal again. Well, it's not necessarily legal. It's no longer a felony. So Kody wants to leave polygamy or something like that. He even talks about monogamy and how it's a dream of his.
With you.
I don't want to spend the rest of my life listening to women tell me how unhappy they are. I think the sunset's going to be good. If I was a monogamist and I had one wife, I don't know, maybe it's a fantasy in my part.
So what are you going to be? Are you going to be the sister wives, or are you going to be the husband with one wife? And then what happens to the show? I feel like part of this is just for ratings. I also feel like part of this is because half the wives don't even like him anymore, and he isn't happy. And so instead of actually staying in this, he wants to just peace out. He always seems like the kind of guy that will take the path of least resistance. So tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.